Mira in a new city. Hi Mira, I'm already there. I received a text on my phone. I finished the rest of my breakfast, slung my backpack over my shoulder, and headed for the door. Mom, Leah's here. I called toward the kitchen. I'm coming. Good luck on your first day. I heard my mother's voice as I closed the door behind me. Leah, my cousin, was waiting for me in the car. Her fair skin glowed in the sun, and her red hair was pulled back into a neat bun. She looked perfect, as always. I nervously pulled my shirt down, making sure it covered my belly. I was a little nervous about the new place, but I tried not to show it. Hi, Leah said, getting into the car. Hi. So, how are you? Ready for your first day? She started the engine with a smile. I hope everything goes smoothly. I chuckled back, although inside I was nervous. We were driving to school. Today was my first day at my new school, Milton High. We had just moved here when my mom got a promotion. The move was a necessity, and although I didn't want to leave my old life behind, I had no choice but to adjust. Leah had been an incredible support. She showed me around the city, introduced me to new friends, and even offered to drive me to class. We parked at the school, and I took a deep breath and got out of the car. In front of me was the building that would now be my new home for the year. Ready? Go conquer the world, Leah said encouragingly, clapping my shoulder. I'll try my best, I replied with a smile, although inside I was still nervous. Leah pouted, her brows furrowing slightly. Mira, let's go. I didn't hang out with you because someone asked me to. I actually enjoyed our summer together. You're not just my cousin, you're my real friend. I felt a pang of guilt for my words. Sorry, I just don't want to be a burden to you. You already drive me to school every day. I don't want to be a burden. What are you saying, Mira? Friends are supposed to be a burden to each other. Leah laughed, once again easily breaking the tension. Okay, you've convinced me. I grinned back, unable to resist her infectious energy. Oh, and while we're on the subject of burdens, let me introduce you to a few. She waved her hand toward the group of kids standing outside the school. They all looked like models from a magazine cover, slim, well-groomed, and of course, confident. My inner voice began to whisper the usual doubts again. I quickly suppressed it, because if it weren't for Leah, I would definitely feel alone here. I smiled gratefully and followed her. So, how's the start of the school year been? Our teacher, Mr. Hughes, asked during third period. His enthusiasm didn't elicit much of a response. The class mostly responded without enthusiasm, with muffled groans or comments like, good, or boring. As always, no emotion, huh? He chuckled, starting to write his name on the board, Mr. Hughes. For those of you who are new here, he glanced at me, pausing a little longer than the others. My name is Mr. Hughes. You can just call me that. I nodded, feeling like I might be the only new student in this class. Mr. Hughes was about to continue, but the door opened. A tall boy walked into the classroom and handed the teacher a note. I couldn't help but look at him immediately. He was tall, muscular, and very confident. His eyes met mine for a moment, and I felt my cheeks begin to flush. I hate being embarrassed so easily. Mr. Raines, tell your coach to give you more time to come to class, Mr. Hughes said sternly. But the boy simply mumbled something unintelligible and sat down at the desk, right next to me. My nervousness immediately increased because there were still empty seats in the classroom. As I was saying, Mr. Hughes returned to the topic. It's the first day, so I'm going to give you an assignment for the semester. This will be your final project. Okay? Another wave of disgruntled sighs followed. "Great," Mr. Hughes smiled. "Your assignment is to write a 5,000-word analytical essay on any work by Shakespeare. We're looking for an in-depth analysis of the text, as well as the influence of Elizabethan culture and politics on his work." I couldn't help but smile. I'd always loved literature, and this assignment was right up my alley. My joy was short-lived, however. A hand landed heavily on my desk, and I jumped. "Hey!" a familiar voice called out. It was Rains. He leaned toward me, his dark hair falling over his forehead, adding to his mysteriousness. I noticed a glint in his eyes that made me feel a little uneasy. "Yeah?" I asked, trying not to seem nervous. His gaze slid lazily over me, and I felt my cheeks flush again. "Can I borrow a pen?" he asked with a mocking smirk. My gaze slid down to his jeans, from the pocket of which 2 pens were sticking out. Was he kidding? I narrowed my eyes. "No," I answered sharply, not even trying to hide my irritation. He just smirked, and as if not noticing my refusal, began to write in his notebook with a pen that he suddenly found. The situation was unpleasant, but not new. His self-confidence, his manners. All this reminded me of those guys who always thought they were better than others. He was, of course, handsome, but as always, behind the appearance hid a repulsive personality. "With all that fat sticking out of you, it's a wonder you have any manners." His voice cut through me, and my confidence instantly crumbled. The words stuck in my mind like a splinter. I felt a surge of anger, but as always, I couldn't find the strength to respond. I clenched my fists and turned away. "Idiot," I thought, holding back the tears that were threatening to spill. It was best to stay away from people like that. I could never stand that kind of teasing, and it always left scars. I slammed my locker so hard that the metal door slammed shut, drawing a few curious glances. But I didn't care. Rain's words were still ringing in my ears. I hated that I'd let him get to me, and I was angry not only at him, but at myself for not being able to respond with dignity. "Mira!" Leah's cheerful voice quickly brought me back to reality. She came up to me with a spring in her step, energetic and carefree as always, followed by Lola, a quieter but no less charming girl I was just getting to know. "How was your day?" Leah smiled at me, and her energy was so infectious that I couldn't help but smile back, even though my mood was sour. "So far, so good," I replied, though Rains' words were still swirling around in my head. I didn't want Lola to feel left out, so I turned to her with a friendly smile. She, as always, simply shrugged, clearly not in the mood for conversation. "Come on, Sadhvi is waiting for us." Leah confidently took our hands, and we headed towards the cafeteria. Lunch was going to be interesting. Leah had invited me to sit with her friends, and I was happy about that offer. How lucky I was to have such a cousin. As we entered the spacious cafeteria, filled with the hum of voices and the smell of food, my mood seemed to improve, but the elevator didn't last long. I immediately spotted James Rains, sitting at a table by the window with a group of guys. He looked like a king surrounded by his entourage, and he was already looking in my direction with that same narrowed eye that made my stomach churn. "Let me introduce you to the guys," Leah offered, heading straight for the table where James was sitting. "No need. I'm fine." I tried to dodge, but she was already pulling me along, as if not noticing my protest. Leah was stronger than she looked, and I tried unsuccessfully to contain her ardor. "Don't worry, they're all fine. Well, except for James. He's a jerk," she whispered, nodding at the guy I was starting to hate. As we approached their table, Leah greeted a blonde boy named Lucas. Lola nodded briefly to the others, and I, trying not to meet James's eyes, looked around the cafeteria, feeling his gaze burning into my back. "Is this your cousin you were talking about?" Lucas asked Leah. "Yes, this is Mira," she replied, and I forced a friendly smile. Lucas was one of those guys who was impossible to ignore. His green eyes and soft smile made him very attractive, and I was a little jealous of the girls who probably dreamed of being near him. "It's nice to meet you," I replied, trying to sound confident, although inside I was seething with emotions. "It's good that you're with us," he said, looking at me with genuine interest. But then a familiar voice rang out. "She's better off just being her friend." I doubt she'll find anyone else with her looks. James Raines didn't miss the opportunity to throw in another taunt, and I felt all my efforts to appear confident crumble. "Shut up, James," Leah snapped, squeezing my shoulder. I was grateful for her support, but at the same time I felt small and vulnerable. "Don't pay attention to that idiot," Lucas interjected. "He's just in a bad mood today. Don't let him ruin your day." But the mood was already ruined. I felt everything inside me shrink, and I wanted to run, to hide from those eyes, from that mockery. "Maybe we should just leave?" I suggested quietly, hoping that Leah would agree. But she was in a different mood. "Not now. We'll stay, and you'll show me that you're not so easy to break," she said confidently, sitting me down next to Lucas. I tried to be inconspicuous, but even sitting there, I knew I was taking up more space than I wanted. I sat down at the table across from James, feeling his piercing gaze on me. It seemed like he was ready to fight me just to sit next to his friend. He seemed to be silently assessing my every move, and I felt uneasy at the thought of someone looking at me like that. The rest of the boys introduced themselves. Matt, the smart guy with glasses, Axel, and Keith had gone to lunch. As promised, they would treat us. When they returned, the table was literally groaning with food, more than enough for the 8 of us. I looked with some horror at the amount of food. I didn't want James to find something to laugh about again. Lucas started asking me questions about my new school, showing obvious interest, which gave me confidence. He was so sweet that I couldn't help but smile, but the smile quickly disappeared as soon as I saw James's narrowed eyes again. The whole dinner seemed tense, despite the attempts of Lucas and the others to make it pleasant. The conversation at the table mostly revolved around sports. Lucas was the captain of the football team, and James, as it turned out, played a key role in it. There was a lot of friendly banter between them, which, however, seemed a little tense. I felt like an outsider at this party of life, especially when James gave me another look full of hidden mockery. I barely ate, feeling that any action of mine could become a target for James. He didn't say anything, but his silent judgment hung in the air, making me feel uneasy. It seemed like he was watching my every move, and I couldn't relax. "Mira," my father's voice brought me back to reality. We were lying on the couch after a long day. I had just finished my homework, tired but happy to have survived my first day at a new school. "Which color is better?" He turned the laptop screen towards me, showing 2 pages with different website themes. I chose the first option, which made my dad smile approvingly. It was our little ritual to discuss his work in the evenings. "Did you survive your first day?" he asked, looking away from the screen. I nodded, not wanting to go into detail or talk about James. When Mom came home from work, she immediately announced that it was time for us to sit down to dinner, which meant it was time to ask me about my first day of school. Dinner was in full swing when Mom started asking me about my first day of school. "So, how did it go?" She put her fork down and looked at me intently. I pretended not to hear the question, immersing myself in my food. Dad noticed this and tried to soften the situation with a smile. "Maybe we should give her a break, honey. The first day at a new school is stressful after all." Mom nodded, but didn't back down. I understand, but Dad and I always want to know what's going on. Is everything okay? Do you have anyone to talk to? I couldn't avoid this conversation, so I slowly raised my head and forced myself to smile. Yeah, everything is fine. The teachers are nice. Leah introduced me to her friends. Sounds good, Mom concluded with a smile. I decided to skip James's story. Even with all the support from my family, I didn't want to complain about another school bully. Plus, I wasn't sure I was ready to deal with this alone, but I certainly wasn't going to embarrass my parents by telling them about the bullying. After dinner, I went to my room and thought about James again. He was annoying, sure, but there was something odd about his behavior. Maybe it wasn't just malice, but something more, but I couldn't figure it out yet. Every look he gave me, though it seemed judgmental, had hidden emotions I couldn't decipher. My cousin Leah was wonderful. She supported me in every situation, and her friends, especially Lucas, made the day less stressful than it could have been. I felt like I would eventually find my niche here. The only dark spot was James. I knew I had to learn to ignore his attacks and not let his words hurt me, but it was hard. The next day at school, the same thing happened. James was around me again, in the computer room, in the cafeteria, and every time I felt his eyes on me. But something had changed. At some point, when our eyes accidentally met again, he didn't say anything sarcastic. He just looked away. After that, a quiet but noticeable change began. We started exchanging fewer barbs, or rather, he stopped provoking me. Maybe Lucas, his friend, had some influence on him, or James himself realized that his behavior was pointless. By the end of the first week, I realized that, despite his initial behavior, James was no longer trying to irritate me. Perhaps he was bored, or he simply realized that I would not be an easy target. But somehow, his indifference to me was better than open hostility. We did not become friends. He was still that weird guy with his inconsistent behavior, but I no longer felt pressured. I found solace in my friendship with Leah and her boys, and gradually I began to feel more confident. Maybe one day I will be able to stand up for myself, but for now, this was a good first step.